Good morning. I'm Grant from Blackmagic Design, and we've got some exciting things to show you today. Over the last few years, we've been worrying about broadcast a bit. Broadcasters have increased competition from Netflix and online, and so the budgets are smaller than they have been before. So, we've been thinking about that and sort of how can we help. And I think the biggest thing a lot of broadcasters have been worried about is how can they upgrade to Ultra HD, with those tight budgets. I mean, government's helped with the HD transition because they wanted the VHF and UHF band space back. So there was a lot of government help to sort of get broadcasters to move to HD. But there hasn't been any government help really to move to Ultra HD. So that's becoming a bit tough. So if you're a traditional broadcaster with a tighter budget, how can you move to Ultra HD? They'd like to, but it's not something that they can really do. So we thought, well, how can we help those traditional broadcasters? But at the same time, how can we sort of help a new emerging group of web broadcasters? There's like a whole new industry of web broadcasting that's coming online. So that was also something we were thinking about. Web broadcasters need the same high-end workflows that traditional broadcasters have been used to. So both groups need help. And, we started Blackmagic Design to do this. This is our job, this is what we do. So we've been thinking a lot about that, and we'd love to show you some of the new products we've done to help that. So I think the first thing to talk about is switches. So in the past few years, we've changed all our switches. We've got a great range of Ultra HD models. They're great switches, very professional, 6 and 12G SDI models, but they do SD and HD. I mean, quite a range. The design's even nicer, and they're great switches, but the control panels are a bit expensive, and they're an older design. They're kind of a more traditional design. Not really a modern design, very familiar to traditional broadcasters, but we really thought it was time to update the control panel to match the switches. The first thing to do is bring it out and show you what we've done. So here it is here. Here's the new 1ME, ATM 1ME advanced panel. As you can see, it's a much more modern design. It's less cluttered than the other model. It's a cast metal design. It's very strong. It's got nice big rubber feet, so it really sits nicely on the desk. It's less than 1 rack width, so it'll fit on a slide-out rack shelf. It's got the attachment points on the bottom, so you can bolt it to the rack shelf or bolt it to a desk. The little attachment points actually slide out, so they don't put pressure on the bottom of the panel. So when you bolt them up, they come down and sandwich between the desk and the bolt. Also, the attachment points, it's worth mentioning, attachment points on the bottom of the panel can help security when you're in schools or churches or community areas where a lot of people come and go. You don't want the panel to go walking, so the attachment points, it can be a great security feature. Now, we've got a bunch of nice design features. This is a custom T-handle, which we've designed. Nice rubber-coated feel, so it's much nicer. I've also got a custom design joystick for the DVE and PTZ control, and that's also nice rubber coating. I'll show you the back connectors, if you can get in on those. I think you can see there. So try and get a close-up on that. It's actually similar to the DaVinci panel. So what we have is it connects via Ethernet, just like the old panel, in fact, all the panels. It's got a built-in Ethernet switch, so you can loop out to other panels. So there's the 2 sockets there, and you can connect to either one of those sockets. Now, like all the other Atom products, the IP addresses have been preset. So what that means is you can plug various products just directly with cables. You don't need an Ethernet switch. You can just use the Ethernet cable between the switcher and the panel and a computer running the software, and it all just works. It's just like a serial cable, but if you use an Ethernet switch, then of course you can actually make it work on a network, because it is Ethernet. Now, you've got an AC and DC power connection on the back there. So what that means is you can run it on the standard broadcast 4-pin DC connector, and as well as an AC connection, but also you can use that for redundancy. Like, for example, if you wanted to plug the AC connection in, then you could put a power supply, a standard broadcast DC power supply, plug that into the DC input, and you get redundant power. It's also got USB-C for software updates. We use USB-C on everything now because it's the modern USB. So what I'll do is I'll turn it around, I'll plug it in, and you can see it light up, and I can start to show you some of the features that it's got. So I'll turn it around to the front and position it right so that we can get a close-up. So the first step is I've got a power cable here, so just an AC power cable. I'll plug that in, and you'll see the power come on. And I've also got an Ethernet cable plugged into a switch here. So I'll just into a switcher. So I'll plug that in and you'll see the switcher will come up and there is everything. So now the panel's alive and you can see it talking to the switcher. You can, use the T handle to do a transition manually. Now, obviously if you've used switches before, you'll instantly recognize the layout. There's nothing really too crazy about it. It's a very traditional sort of layout. So you've got the preview row down here where you select the source, the program row, the select buses up the top here. There's 4 upstream key controls here in the background. There's the different transitions here. You've got the T-bar handle for the manual control. You've also got some downstream key controls here and the fade to black, all very normal. The big difference with this panel is that the system controls over here using the LCD. So it's all pretty normal. Now, there is some nice design changes. The buttons are a new design. We've scalloped the button a little bit deeper than what the previous buttons were, so that helps keep your finger on the button and makes less errors. The other big thing you'll notice on this panel, particularly if you can get a close-up looking down on it, is the source labeling is now done via LCDs. There's an LCD here and here. So what that means is the biggest problem we had with the old control panel is we're limited to 4 characters. And so on this panel, we can have longer labels. Also, it turns out, of course, that those 4 character displays on the old panels are really expensive. So this also lowers cost and gives you more features. And the other cool thing is because they're a full color LCD, the source labels can now be colored. So you can actually customize some of the colors. Helps divide up, your panel when you're organizing where you'd like to put things on the control panel. The other big thing is the source labels can now be different languages. Even non-Roman character sets like Japanese and Mandarin are also supported on here, which is a huge boost, I think, over the old panel. The other thing too is that the 1ME and 2ME panels we had before, the broadcast panels, slightly different layouts with each other, but this panel now has a layout that's more similar to the 2ME panel. So there's less, it's just, if you're moving between the two, it's much easier to do. Now the LCD area around the top here is worth focusing on a little bit. Now you can, of course, it's the panel. I can, select transitions as normal and, use it very normally. But the LCD is where I get all that, it replaces the system control. It's where I get much better control than I've had before. You can just push a button over here and it'll switch to the menu on the LCD. So you've got all sorts of different functions that you can set, like transitions, keys, color generators, media. There's a lot of stuff you can do on there, and of course even settings. So this side is where over here on the right-hand side is where the numerical entry is. So if you're typing in a transition duration or something like that, you got a keypad here. You can just type that in. So I think the first thing probably to show you is the home screen, and that's what we've got displayed there. You can see there's labels highlighted for program preview, and they change. As you switch between sources, you can see they change, and as you do a transition, you can see they highlight red when they're on air. Now some of the other settings we've got in there, maybe I'll show you quickly a few of the different screens. So there's we show DVE transitions. So if we go and have a look at that, I think there you can see the LCD now shows the DVE transitions. We could show you the keyer menu. That's over here. So you can see the keyers now illuminated. The other thing too is that if you select one of the keyers, if you push the different keyers, it'll automatically select that menu. So it's much faster if you just want to adjust a keyer. The LCD will keep up with you even on the main button panel. Of course, you can also do button mapping on the panel. You can actually decide what sources are on what buttons. So it really allows you to kind of take away sources that you're not using. You might have different sources, like the TV studio switcher, for example. It's got HDMI on the first 4 inputs and SDI on the second 4 inputs for a total of 8 inputs. If you're not using HDMI, you might want to map the SDI inputs down to the bottom of the row here. Put some other media players somewhere else. You can do full button mapping on this panel, which you could do on the other panel as well. So if you want to look in the settings, and then you can go to button mapping, and there you can see it. And you can turn the knobs, and you can adjust quite a lot of features, because obviously we've got the LCD menus now, so there's more you can do. So you can set the source for each button. You can just scroll, but you can also set the label color and the button color. So it's nice having the button color. It's another new thing. You've got a few different colors to choose from, but you can also, it makes it much easier to divide and organize the panel. Things get busy, and it's another thing to help you organize where you're putting everything. You can also, the other thing that's really nice about this panel is you can program macros on it and you can trigger them really nicely. So for example, if we go to the macro menu there, you can see, if you can get a close-up of that, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, you can see it there. You can get control of macros. Now, that's even a little bit more powerful, but I'll show you this select bus. So see along the select bus here first. Say if I select key 1, which I've actually got on air at the moment, what will happen is now the select bus is active and I can see all the sources, and I'm selecting the sources for that keyer. But what's also interesting is I can trigger macros from this select bus. So it is a select bus like the other panel had, but now it's also a macro bus. So if I select the macro button, you can say they all illuminate blue, so it shows you that it's in that macro mode, and all those source labels have changed to the different macros that you've programmed. So I think that's a really fast way of triggering macros. You can not only program the macros on here, but you can trigger them really fast just by pushing that macro button. And when you push it back, it goes back to being a select bus. But you can also do aux control from the select bus as well. So if we want to do that, all we have to do is select an aux in the menu, which is down there. And you can now, of course, you can scroll through the sources on the knobs, but you've also got, say if I do this one, I've now got, so I can scroll through those. See, I've got some button mapping on here, but you can also now select the different auxes and they illuminate white. And the reason they do that is because that's the same as the ATEM television studio switcher that we have. When you push that aux button on the top right-hand side, the source buttons go white. So white's like an indicator that the panel's in aux mode. And I can get back to the home button whenever I like. So you can see it's a really professional panel, but it's also easy to use. And some of these extra features that we've got capability, we can do now because it's a much more powerful panel. The custom labeling will let us do these things. So it's a professional panel, which but it's easy to use. And to me, easy to use doesn't mean to say that it's dumbed down in any way. Easy to use means it's faster. And so they're absolutely locked together. The easier something is to use, the faster it is. So it's one of those things that sure, it can help new people coming into the industry, but what really matters is speed. You want to go fast. That's the point of having a panel like this. So there's many more features than what I'm really showing here. It is a professional, fully featured modern control panel. It includes really powerful features, such as the more modern design, obviously, the new button design to reduce errors. The button labels use the LCDs now, so you've got really a lot of control in there, and we're going to be able to really incorporate a lot of feedback from people as well because, it's a very software-driven panel now. We can do a lot more with it. The built-in LCD for the system control is really nice. It's just such a fast way of doing things. The labels are bigger, more easy to see than those small buttons we had before. The new T-bar design feels much nicer. And it works with all Blackmagic ATEM switches, even the really old models, the original models that we launched, even the original TV Studio and the original ATEM production switches that we did. It's portable, it fits in a rack width. So this new control panel is much more than a basic panel. But the great thing about it is the new ATEM 1ME advanced panel is cheaper than the original older model. So if we can put up the slide, you can see the price. It's going to be available today. It's in stock and it's $2,995. Which is just under $3,000, and you'll be able to get it today. So you might have noticed that there's 4 buttons on the panel that I haven't talked about, and these are the ME selection buttons. Now there's 4 of them because the panel can control 4 MEs. So I've got ME1, ME2, ME3, and ME4. Now, but what's interesting is we didn't have a 4ME switcher until now. So today we're going to be introducing a new ATEM 4ME Broadcast Studio 4K. Now it replaces our other high-end 12G SDI 2ME Broadcast Studio model. It's got similar features. It's a very high-end switcher. I'll bring it out and show you. Getting a bit busy under there. So here it is there. I'll put it there. So in fact, what I've been doing is I've been using that switcher with this panel. That's why I've been able to actually select the 4 different MEs. Now this switcher has the same features as the 2ME Broadcast Studio 4K it replaces. It's got 20 12G SDI inputs. For all HD and Ultra HD formats. In fact, I'll turn it around quickly so you can see the back. So you can see it's very similar to that of the switcher. Each input's got full resync. And obviously the 12G SDI allows a frame rate up to 60 frames per second. So, it does the high frame rates that broadcasters use. You can see there's 6 independent aux outs. It's also controlled from the front panel. I'll flip it back around again so you can see the front. There it is there. So you can see it looks very similar. So you can control the auxes from the front panel. You've got the 6 outputs and you can route all the various sources into it. It's got 18 SMPTE wipes. They're also used as pattern generators. There's 2 color generators. There's 2 built-in multi-views that work in Ultra HD or HD. You can switch them between what you need. So you can see 16 sources in total, plus program and preview. It's got the built-in audio mixer, which allows you to mix all the inputs. It's got analog inputs like the 2ME had. It's got a media pool with 360 Ultra HD frames of animation in it, plus the extra frames of stills, and 1,440 frames in HD. So it's got a lot of media in it. Still got the full 2D DVE with zoom, pan, and rotate. It's got the SuperSource processing engine. That's a whole separate multi-layer processing engine with 4 DVEs in the background that composites like picture-in-picture type effects and comes in as a source. It's got the 2 downstream keys for graphics. And like the older model, it's a very professional switcher. So you can see a lot of it's very similar. But there's some big, powerful new features it's got. This new model has obviously the 4 completely independent mix effects rows. So it's a true 4ME switcher. The new 1ME advanced panel controls all of them just by pushing a button. But we've also upgraded the software to allow you to control each ME. So what I'll do, I'll quickly show you that. In fact, I'll plug in the computer. I've got a Mac there, but it obviously comes with Windows and Mac software. I'll plug in the Ethernet cable. I'll loop out of this panel into the software so that the software comes up. And we've got a HDMI connection out of the computer here, so we can switch to the computer interface. So let me show you the MEs. In fact, I'll show you it on the software. If we can bring the user interface is up. So you can see I've got the user interface here. Now ME1 is down the bottom here, but ME2, 3, and 4 are up here. So you can see before up the top of the software, we only had ME2, but now this is a 4ME switcher. We've got these tabs here, and we've got ME3 and 4 control as well up the top there. So what that means is you don't actually need a control panel to run the 4ME switcher. But it can be a bit overwhelming using a 4ME switcher with a software control panel. So using a hardware panel is much faster. And so, obviously that's where most people will use it. But it is nice that you can still use the software. Now, the really powerful thing about this new 4ME switcher is that we haven't just added 4MEs. We've also got a whole new ATEM advanced chroma keyer. It's a completely new design. It's much more powerful than the older keyer. And the best news is there's 4 ATEM advanced chroma keys per ME. So that's a total of 16 advanced chroma keys in total in the switcher. In fact, if we go back to the software, I can show you in the past on the 2ME model, the keys 3 and 4 were disabled because there was only 4 keys in the total in that switcher. But now you can see we've got all the keys enabled. As we switch across ME3 and 4, you can see that all those keys stay enabled. So you can see we've got 4 chroma keys per ME. Now the other thing too is that if we look down at in fact we go back to this software interface again. Sorry, can show you that the controls for the keys are much more powerful as well. I mean, it's a much more powerful switcher. So we're on ME1. You can see some of the settings we've got. Now it's a much more feature-rich keyer. So it's got a whole bunch of controls, and it's also got a cool color picker. So you can actually select the green source into the keyer. Now, this is where you do it here. You can see it's disabled. That's because I've got the keyer on air. If you look down here at the panel, because you've got a color picker that works in the preview out, it's designed to stop you from actually doing this while it's on air. So it'll help you. So if I deselect this, it'll automatically re-enable that color picker into the software here, which has come up. So now I can basically push the preview button, and what that'll do is it'll output. I'm not sure if we can actually see the preview out by itself, but there's the picker. Now, if I bring up that picker, I can adjust the size of the sample area, and I can also move it around. So as I move it around, you can see now I've got it over here, and I can see myself over there. So I've got a pretty rough selection of the keyer. I can enlarge that to make the keyer a bit better. And then now I've got a nice key channel. So I need to get a background into there. So what I've got is, if we can go back to the multi-view, there it is. So what we've got in Media Player 1 is a rough weather map. And now what I've done is I've selected that as the background, and it's coming into the key. So I don't think I've got a bad key considering I'm using the switcher panel upside down. So there you can see it's pretty easy to use. We did a quick key. We've put her over the presenter, there's a weather lady on over the top of the weather map. And so, even that key result's actually pretty nice. Now, there's a lot of extra features in here as well. So in fact, I might scroll down. If we go back to the UI a little bit, you can see some of them down here. Oh, there's a lot. I mean, it doesn't even fit on the screen. But we've got, settings in there for it has chroma correction for spill. There's also flare suppression in there, some foreground color adjustments. So there's brightness, contrast, saturation, and RGB controls. I mean, there's really quite a lot of settings and control in this new Kia. And of course, the ATEM Advanced Chroma Key still does Luma key and pattern key and DVE key as well. I mean, that's still in there. I think the thing that's amazing is that there's 16 completely independent copies of this key in the switcher. So I think it's much better now that there's than the total of 4 keys, but in the older Toolme Broadcast Studio model. With 4 of these advanced ATEM keys per row, it's good for virtual set work where you've got a bunch of cameras with backgrounds. So, it's really, I think it's going to be much more powerful. It's something that people have asked for. And it's also logical. I mean, the small switches have 4 keys on one row because they're only a 1 ME switcher. Now we've got that consistency. So if you've got a workflow used to where you're using more than 2 keys on the row, you can just scale up from a 1 ME switcher to the 4 ME switcher, and it's just the same. Each row is the same. So I think that's really nice. So to summarize, you get an incredibly advanced 4 ME switcher here now. It's got powerful features such as the 16 ATEM Advanced Chroma keys. It's got the 4 ME rows now. It's 20 12G SDI inputs, each with a full resync. You've got the media pool, the DVE, the super source, the audio mixer, the 6 aux outs, 2 multi-views. The software control panel is free and it comes with it. It's for Windows and Mac OS. So we can bring up the slide and show you the price. This is an extremely powerful switcher for really high-end work. It's also available today for $5,995. And it's fully supported by the new ATEM 1 ME Advanced panel, as we've been showing here. And also the ATEM switcher software update 7.3 supports this switcher as well. So that's the software you need to get for that. But we've got some really good news for the ATEM Toolme Broadcast Studio 4K users. Now I'm talking about the 12G model, the ATEM Toolme Broadcast Studio model. This design is actually similar. The new model is very similar in design to the older model. So what that means is you can actually upgrade from the Toolme Broadcast Studio to the 4 ME Broadcast Studio. So what that means is you can actually now upgrade and go from the 4 chroma keys you had, the older model, older style chroma key, to 16 of the ATEM Advanced chroma keys. So this upgrade will completely transform your switcher. I mean, you're going to go from Toolme to 4 ME and get 16 of the advanced chroma keys. Now the great news is this software update is completely free. If we can bring that slide up, you can see, well, there's not much to see because it just says free. That update is actually available today as well. So all you need to do is download ATEM Switcher Update 7.3 to get the upgrade. I think it's really exciting to be able to do this for free. It's sort of, in many ways, it's our way of saying thanks to the original customers of the switcher because, by buying the original switcher, you help pay for the engineering for the new one. So it's really nice that we can do this update for free of charge. In many ways, I think this is probably one of the biggest updates that a product's ever had, and it's totally free. So now the next thing we really wanted to address is, that there's some problems with broadcast cameras that we really wanted to fix. As we talked about, we want to lower the costs to allow broadcasters to move to Ultra HD. Budgets are really tight. There's no money to upgrade to Ultra HD in broadcast, really. But, if you talk to people in broadcast, they do want to move to new technologies. Everybody likes the new technologies. So it's sort of stagnated because of those tight budgets. But there's some other problems too that broadcast cameras have. Cameras for broadcast tend to use strange file formats, like camera formats, and also some odd media cards. The media cards are very, sometimes it's even tapes, but they're very proprietary to the TV industry. So that's an issue. Another problem we thought that really needed to be looked at was sort of the unused time that cameras suffer from. Cameras in broadcast spend a lot of time packed away in their box. We think that we could try and find ways of using them more often, so you get a better return from the purchase of the camera. Plus, the other thing is shooting. Cameras that shoot production work or E&G work or news or whatever it might be are very different to cameras that are used in studios, and they're often completely separate cameras. Studio cameras are very different to normal sort of E&G cameras, for example. They're completely different types of cameras. So it's sort of very expensive and wasteful in that way because, if you're not doing a live job, the studio cameras just sit there in boxes. So we think there's a lot of problems we can actually help with with broadcast cameras. So today we're going to announce a new camera called Ursa Broadcast. In fact, I'll bring one out. I've got one here. In fact, I'll move this out of the way. We'll put our switcher out of the way here. Make some space. Here is Ursa Broadcast. See there. Now, Ursa Broadcast it's a professional camera with Ultra HD, but it's also great for regular HD as well. It's based on our Ursa Mini Pro digital film camera, but it's got a smaller 4K sensor for B4 lenses. Our digital film cameras have large sensors, so they've got a very shallow depth of field. But Ursa Broadcast has got a smaller sensor, so it's designed for B4 lenses, so you get a really wide depth of field. Shallow depth of field is nicer for film work, like it's very creative. But broadcasters need to really have everything in focus. You don't want to be chasing focus. So a wide depth of field means you're not really constantly trying to refocus on everything. B4 lenses are also a global broadcast standard. So there's a huge variety of lenses that exist. In fact, we're using Ursa Broadcasts for this video. So you can see everything's in focus and you get a feel for what the depth of field is. So I think it's really exciting. Now, what's also really good about using the Ursa Mini Pro design is it also uses Ursa Mini Pro accessories. So that'll really lower the cost. The other great thing is we get the Blackmagic operating system. So the camera works in a similar way as Ursa Mini Pro and Ursa Mini. But this is an Ultra HD broadcast camera, so internally it's quite different. But most important, it's affordable. So I think one of the topics I'd like to talk about is, while this is an Ultra HD broadcast camera, it's also an incredible HD camera. And I think it's worth taking a moment to really sort of talk about that. HD, still 100% of broadcast is done in HD at the moment. We're just starting to see some Ultra HD, but it's really all HD. So HD is very, very important. So while this is a great Ultra HD camera, a lot of people will be using it for HD. So I think if you're working in HD, it's worth understanding really how this camera fits in as an upgrade option. Now, obviously you can use the lenses you already own. So that's a really big thing. You can also use the batteries you already own. You can use V-Lock or gold mount batteries. And you can also, this is where you get the benefits, is you can use regular SD cards or CFast cards. So there's nothing unusual about the media. And also you can use files that are used in edit software and media management systems. So there's nothing really exotic about the media. It has the same controls you're used to. You can see the side. It's very familiar broadcast controls and features. And of course, it's an Ultra HD camera, so you got lots of extra pixels. It takes the Ultra HD images and downscales them to HD. So you got a really good quality image. So this is a very, very good upgrade, even if you're just working in HD. Now, if you don't own a lens, you can buy lenses on eBay for a very low cost. What's interesting is, and one of the effects that I've noticed is broadcast cameras have generally been so expensive. Every time you bought a new one, people end up buying a new lens as well. So what it meant is that a lot of the old cameras were sitting in their boxes with their old lenses on them. So there's actually a lot of lenses out there that are available, and you can pick them up on eBay at quite affordable costs. Now, the camera works with any B4 lens, so you can even use the older analog control lenses or the newer digital control lenses. And we've tried out a bunch of HD lenses that we bought off eBay, and we found often we could get 2.5K or even 3K out of some of them. So a lot of the HD lenses actually perform very, very well, even if you can do a bit of Ultra HD shooting with them, and they can do quite well. If you haven't used one of these broadcast lenses before, and if we can move across here a little bit, you can see two of the Ursa Broadcasts configured, and we can see we've got lenses on the front. Now, the difference with B4 lenses, if you haven't had any experience with them and you've used photographic lenses, they're parfocal, which means that the focus doesn't change as you zoom. So this is one of the biggest things, and plus, of course, they're just wonderful designs, but what it means is you can quickly change shots without hunting the focus all the time. That's much better than photography lenses. Photography lenses give you great quality, but every time you zoom, you've got to redo the focus. These lenses, you don't have to do that. The other nice thing about them, of course, is you've got these wonderful zoom controls on the side. In fact, when you're using this on your shoulder, you hold it with the lens on the side there. So that's, and you can adjust the zoom like that, and you can, focus. So, ergonomically, the lenses are much better because of the fact they become part of the camera, really. In fact, I think, my experience is B4 lenses really don't come off the cameras once they're on there. It becomes a unit. You got smooth control of zoom and iris. You don't get that on photo lenses. So it's a wonderful package. Now, when you're recording HD, you can use standard SD cards because they're fast enough. If we go on the side here, you can see you've got the 4 media slots. Now, the camera supports both interlaced and progressive HD. So if you're still using interlaced, a lot of broadcasters are using interlaced, of course. It works fine with that. It also supports DNX HD 220 and DNX HD 145 and ProRes, of course. So what that means is you can record into the formats that are used by broadcast media management systems and edit software. So you don't have to transcode anything. The media on this camera will integrate really well with all those edit systems. You pretty much just mount the media and edit. I mean, the SD cards, of course, you can plug into most computers and just mount those files directly. Now, what's also good about the camera is it even supports RAW if you want to do high-end work. You need to use fast cards for that, but it'll even allow you to do that. So the camera is affordable, but it also, it's got better image performance. This camera also, even though it's a broadcast camera, it's got more dynamic range than a typical broadcast camera has. Now, most broadcast customers don't really have time to color grade images. So when we have more dynamic range, we have to be careful about how we use that. So it's really vital that the camera produces good images without color correction. I mean, we originally got into cameras because we wanted to supply DaVinci Resolve with really, images that we could color grade. But in this case, we've kind of flipped around the other way. What we're doing here is we're producing a camera that produces wonderful images without color correction. So you can really, mount the media, edit the material, and get it to air quickly. Now, you can actually also select the video gamma for regular shooting, which is the mode that it's got, and that's pretty much what you'd normally use. There's also the film gamma, so that you get all the dynamic range from the sensor. There's 12 stops of dynamic range on the sensor, so it's more than a simple video camera. And you can select film and get that, which is similar to what the digital film cameras we have do. So if you do want to use color correction, you're doing high-end programming work with this, then you can do that. But there's a new extended video mode, which captures that dynamic range but produces good images. So it's got the benefits of film dynamic range, but without really needing to grade the images. So what we do is the camera maps that dynamic range into the video image. So it produces nice looking images that kind of incorporate the dynamic range. So it's kind of between film and video, the nice looking pictures that really handle highlights and stuff very, very well. But you get the benefits of just being able to shoot and edit. Of course, the extra dynamic range is really great when you're working in HDR. If you edit in DaVinci Resolve, you can use that dynamic range and finish in HDR because it does that. One of the things that's worth also mentioning, this camera includes 3D LUTs. So if you're doing some serious programming work, you can load a couple of LUTs, 3D LUTs into the camera. We've got some new LUTs actually we're including with the camera. There's a Rec 2020 hybrid log gamma and a Rec 2020 PQ gamma 3D LUT that's now included with the camera. Now you can select those LUTs and output that on the SDI output. So as I said, if you're working in HD, there's lots of extra resolution. You get really good RGB frequency response. It's a full HD, Ultra HD, image that's captured from the sensor and downscaled to HD. So it really produces a nice full frame and wonderful quality. Now, as an Ultra HD or HD camera, there's a flexibility issue that we talked about before, trying to utilize the camera more. And what we've really done is it's 2 cameras in one. And we kind of pioneered this a little bit with Ursa Mini Pro, but in this camera, it's really more focused and designed on for broadcast. So what this means is, you'll spend more time, this camera will spend more time working for you. It's 2 cameras in one. You can use it as a production camera for regular shooting or as a studio camera. So this means if you can reconfigure the camera for different kinds of work. So this is a really big thing. It's basically a studio camera that records, or it's a production camera with a sort of studio camera hidden inside. This is very important. Live switching, multi-camera live switching is an extremely fast way to do programming. Of course, live multi-camera switching also lets you do live streaming. It's an extremely fast way of doing production work. And so you can change over doing production work or live studio work at any time. It's extremely flexible, extremely fast, of course, when you're using it in a studio configuration. So you can really keep using the cameras for different kinds of work. You can just shift around for different kinds of jobs. You can use, if you get a big job, you can grab every camera you have, bring them all into that really large job. So to summarize, I think that we've got similar features to the Ursa Mini Pro as far as controllability, and the features on the outside. I'll close the door so you can see them. We've also got the interchangeable lens mount that Ursa Mini Pro has, so you can change the lens mount if you wanted to. For example, if you were doing some film kind of work, which you can do. Now, Ursa Mini Pro lens mounts, we've got EF lenses, which are Canon style lenses. We've got F mount lenses, which are Nikon lenses, and they're, of course, PL film lenses. So you can switch over to that. Particularly, say for example, if you're rigging a camera in on set and you want to use one of these cameras on set, you don't have to worry about using a big broadcast lens. You could actually just change it to a EF lens and put a photography lens on there because it's a locked off camera that's on set somewhere. Now we also have, if you look at the front, we've got the ND filters. Got 1/4, 1/16, and 1/64 ND filters. Terminology is a little different because it's a broadcast camera. These filters have been designed to match the colorimetry of the sensor, and they also handle IR, infrared, really well. We've got the really great broadcast controls on the side. It's similar features to the Ursa Mini Pro, so I won't go into a lot of detail here. But it's very familiar to broadcasters. If you're a broadcaster, you'll see that that's just a very familiar set of features. On the side, we also have a status display with timecode, camera settings, input timecode, record status, things like that. There's a speaker on the side that's near your ear if you're using it on your shoulder. There's linear adjustments for iris, headphones, and speakers there. There's user-definable buttons on the LCD, below the LCD, sorry. There's a HFR button, a high frame rate button, which allows you to instantly switch across to the high frame rate. So if something happens with some action in it, you can just get to that higher frame rate quickly. The transport buttons are there. There's audio level adjustments there. There's an audio meter on there. There's the fold-out LCD, which I've shown you. It runs the Blackmagic OS, so the menus are really easy to use. In fact, the menus, the LCD menus duplicate all the camera settings on the side. So you've got actually a redundancy. If any of the controls got damaged, for example, you actually can do the same adjustments, controls on the LCD that folds out. You can even power the camera up if the switch got damaged. You can even do that. But also on the LCD, you've also got the ability to change file formats, change the record resolution. You can load camera presets. You can save and load presets. You can load the 33-point 3D lookup tables. You can adjust audio. You can format media cards. So there's a lot of control you have in those menus. And also on the LCD itself, when it's displayed, and I won't go into detail on this because Ursa Mini Pro already has that, and we've got a lot of information on our website about it, but you've got overlays on the LCD for time code, record status, histogram, audio meters, card status, and time remaining, and iris and shutter and color temperature indicators, which you touch and you can then adjust them. There's battery status and a whole lot more. So there's a hell of a lot you can do on the LCD. Also, of course, on the inside, when I fold the screen out, you can see, just like Ursa Mini Pro, you've got controls for iris, focus and transport controls and things like that. You can see the 4 media slots in there. So there's 2 SD card slots and 2 CFast card slots. Remember, the SD card's also UHS 2 cards, so they're the faster versions of the SD cards. So what that means, the reason for the 2 slots, which is the same as a lot of other cameras we have, is continuous recording. If you're doing an interview with someone and it's someone important, you don't want to have to stop the recording to change the card. So when one card fills, it continues recording onto the other card, and you can change the full card while it's recording. So we have that on a couple of other cameras as well. Now there's a USB-C connector up there for updating the camera software. So on the rear, on the back here, you can see we've got the plate off. You've got a spot for a battery plate, or also the SSD recorder. It works with the Ursa Mini's SSD recorder. If we look around the side here, we've got the 12G SDI output, which outputs HD and Ultra HD up to 60p. This also worth mentioning, particularly important for a studio camera. This camera has a lot less latency than the Ursa Mini Pro had. It's got less than 1 frame of latency now. So when you're using it for studio use, you get a really, you want obviously less latency as you possibly can. Like I mentioned before, it supports 1080p and 1080i, as broadcasters often use both. The web guys tend to veer more towards progressive formats, whereas the broadcast guys standardize on interlace formats, but you can just change the camera over to whichever one you like. Now it's got the 12G SDI input, which is a program return, and you use the PGM button, the program button, to switch the viewfinder, or obviously the viewfinder mounted on top, to see the program return. But that SDI program return is how we also support tally, camera control, and talkback. So we do it all through that one SDI. So the 2 SDI links essentially give you a 2-way talkback, and the tally comes back. But it also supports the Blackmagic SDI camera control. So you can do, control as a, full DaVinci primary color corrector in there, like we have on some of the other cameras. So that's all controlled, and obviously lens control and things like that. It's all controlled through that SDI connection. And that's documented in the structure manual, actually, if you wanted to code some. We even have an Arduino shield that lets you rig up your own types of control solutions. We have some new commands we've actually added also to the SDI control protocol, which is documented in the manual. And we've also fixed a bug. Our studio cameras have had the gain set wrong. What we ended up doing was just picking like the lowest ASA and had that as 0 gain. So most people noticed that they had to put 6 or more dB of gain in, and that was basically to get the sensor back to its normal ISO setting. So we've fixed that bug in this camera, and we're going to roll that out through the switches as well. So when you set the gain to 0, it'll actually be the native ISO of the sensor. So things will look a lot better. People thought they had to put gain in to get good-looking pictures, but that was actually the fact that we gained down. So we've fixed that now anyway. So it'll be all sorted out, and the cameras won't require gain, even though you really weren't really adding gain. You were just compensating. But that was a sort of a bug that got lost between the switcher team and the camera team. But we fixed that on this camera, and we'll roll that out. Obviously, we've got the reference input as well, and we've got the broadcast standard 4-pin XLR 12-volt power input as well. And it comes with one of those 4-pin 12-volt power supplies. And we've also got the built-in Bluetooth control, and so you can do Bluetooth control. And there's an API for developers if you want to roll, your own custom control solutions. Now, as I mentioned, it's the same accessories as Ursa Mini Pro and Ursa Mini. So it supports battery plates, the V-Lock or gold mount battery plates. We have battery plates for either type, depending which type of battery you're using. You'll obviously want to use batteries that you've standardized in your facility or station. It uses the Blackmagic Ursa Mini shoulder kit, which we have on here. We use the shoulder kit for both studio cameras and shoulder use, particularly if you want to get it off the camera. The studio viewfinder bolts on with a V mount, so you can get the viewfinders off and change really quickly, so you can go from a studio camera to a shoulder mount scenario, even if you're doing that live really quickly. So do that. The top handle, the shoulder kit includes the top handle here, the shoulder mount down the bottom, and there's also an extension arm if you're using the handle. The camera doesn't come with the handle like the Ursa Mini Pro does, because it's generally rigged up a bit bigger than just the little handheld in front of you, because it is a broadcast camera. It also supports the Ursa viewfinder, which is here. It's a full HD resolution viewfinder, so it's very, very sharp. It's also got menus in it for focus peaking, false color, zoom, zebra, all that sort of those features. There's some user programmable buttons on the top as well. It also supports the Ursa Studio viewfinder. It's very similar, but it's a nice articulated arm viewfinder. It's got actually knobs on the right-hand side for brightness, contrast, and you can vary the focus peaking. It's got similar menus to the Ursa viewfinder, so it's very easy to transition between them. But also it's got some custom guides for positioning, and there's also some user programmable buttons. And also, as I mentioned, it also supports the Ursa Mini SSD recorder. So you can bolt the SSD recorder to the back of the viewfinder, to the back of the camera, and then put the battery on the back of that. Obviously, recording onto SSDs is nice because you can get really long duration recordings if you need them. SSDs are very big, so that is really nice. And you can attach the battery plate to the back of that SSD recorder. So that's 3 different types of media that this camera, in fact, 4 different types of media: SD cards, UHS-2 SD cards, CFast cards, and also SSDs can be all handled on the camera. And 5 different discs could be mounted with that on there. So that's really a lot of flexibility. Also, it supports the Ursa Mini mic mount, which is the mic mount here. If you've got a nice directional microphone with a big windsock on it, you can mount that, use the mic mount. There's 2 different mic mounts, one for the handle, another one bolts on. So it supports that as well. So, to really summarize here, I think, we've got a really powerful camera. It's a great Ultra HD camera, but it's even a fantastic HD camera, which, as I was saying, is really important, I think, for broadcast. It's not enough just to produce an Ultra HD camera and go, hey, that's great. It has to be an incredible HD camera as well. Having the flexibility to change it between regular shooting and studios, it's 2 cameras in one. You can see I've got the 2 configurations here. I've got a studio configuration and a shooting configuration, but this could be shoulder mounted, while you're doing a live broadcast. It's 2 cameras in one, but there's even more flavors than that, really. When you think of the variation, how it can be connected up and rigged. It supports SD, HD, and Ultra HD B4 broadcast lenses. It even actually will work with some old SD lenses. And we've even found some of those SD lenses can do near HD. So you'd be surprised with the quality you can get from some of the, even the really older B4 lenses. But the big thing for me is it's got a very wide depth of field, so everything's in focus, and that's really important to me because we often, we're doing this, like we're showing off our products and everything, so we want wide depth of field, so when you've got a close-up of something, you can see it all. Now, it comes with this B4 lens mount as standard, but you can change it for photo lenses if you want to rig it as a locked-off camera, but also as a beginner. So that's nice too. We want to help people, particularly web broadcasters, get going, and you don't have to even buy a B4 lens if you want to. You can put a photo lens on it just to get going, then you can kind of upgrade as you go. But the big thing is this camera does not use any strange lenses. It's just normal broadcast lenses, nothing proprietary. There's no strange batteries. It uses open standard broadcast batteries. There's no strange media cards. It's just off the shelf SD cards, the fast UHS-2 cards or CFast cards, or even SSDs. This is totally normal. You can get them from stores, computer stores and camera stores. There's no difficult file formats. This just uses DNX and ProRes for NLEs and media management systems. And you can even record to RAW if you want to do some high-end work, which a lot of people do, documentaries and nature-type work, films, things like that. It's got better dynamic range than most broadcast cameras. So I think that's going to be really nice as people transition into HDR and other workflows like that. So we think it's really the world's first affordable professional broadcast camera. If we can bring up the slide, you can see the price. It'll be available from today for $3,495. We think this is going to help change broadcast. I think it's going to help traditional broadcasters upgrade to Ultra HD. It's going to help a new generation of web broadcasters buy truly professional cameras. We've seen these guys struggle with DSLRs. This is the same price as a DSLR. Why would you use a DSLR and fumble with that when you can have all these feature set? So I think it's going to be really powerful for web broadcasters. And even freelancers can afford to upgrade their gear. They can pay it off faster. The quicker you pay off a camera, the quicker that all the income that you have from that camera is profit. So you really want to get into that mode as quickly as possible. That affordability reduces risk. So you can take on a much wider range of work. And you can also push to do more work in Ultra HD as well because, that work is future-proof. So you can kind of try to move your clients into Ultra HD. So if we check the price, there it is. It's available today for $3,495. So we've got a great camera, but the problem we still have is how do we use it for studio use when the cameras are often so far away? 12G SDI is great, obviously, but SDI has limited range. Cameras can be in another part of the building. It's much worse in large sports stadiums where cameras can be a long way away. Broadcast trucks are often parked outside the venue. So, how do you get the cameras inside? Also, power is often not available near the cameras either. So we obviously wanted to work on that problem and how do we solve it? So we can really get a complete studio solution. So what we've done is we've created a new solution using SMPTE fiber. The TV industry has SMPTE fiber already. It's a standard, SMPTE standard. So we've got two new optical fiber products that use SMPTE fiber. One for each end of the fiber, obviously. One side is for the camera and the other side is for the switcher end or the studio end. They both use SMPTE fiber. So they, and of course, they even add studio controls to the back of the camera that broadcasters are familiar with. When you're using a studio camera, you operate it from the back. So we've also got to add controls. We actually talked with broadcasters and asked them what they'd like in a product like this. And the two big things that really came out of those conversations was industrial, strength design. It's got to be a good, solid design, but also familiar controls. So there's no retraining. And so we've done that. That's what our goals were and what we're focused on. So we've got the Blackmagic camera fiber converter for the camera end, and we've got the Blackmagic studio fiber converter for the studio end. This solution allows us to power and extend the camera up to 2 kilometers away from the switcher. They both use SMPTE fiber, which is a TV industry standard. Actually, I'll bring them out. So I'll pause for a second. We'll just bring them out. So here is a collection of things under here. Here's the studio end. And here is I'm going to find everything. I'm running out of space under there. And here is the end that goes on the camera. Now, all broadcasters and high-end broadcast trucks use SMPTE fiber. It's a standard. Generally, the devices that use it are proprietary, but the fiber connection itself is standard. If you haven't used SMPTE Fiber before, I might take a moment just to explain what it is. What you get down to SMPTE Fiber is power, fiber, and a fiber pair and data down the same cable. And because broadcasters already have SMPTE Fiber installed in their buildings, you can just plug it in. It'll use the infrastructure essentially they already have, or you already have. So if I could show a slide of a SMPTE Fiber, you can see the cable ends there. So you can see there's a different sex for either end, so you can actually also daisy chain the cables. In fact, I've got a SMPTE Fiber here. I'll bring one out. Here is one. This one's a 10-meter one. So each end is a little different. You can daisy chain the cables. On the camera end, it pulls back to unplug. There's the plug there. In fact, what I'll do is I'll bring it out. So there's the camera end, and on the other end, and it pulls back. This ring pulls back to unlock it out of the camera, and on the other end, the studio end here, this ring pulls back to disconnect it. So it's pretty easy. So what I'll do is I'll plug in one of the converters. In fact, I'll use this cable. So this end, I'll plug into this cable, into this camera here. So I've got the, I'll plug it into here. So I'll just undo the dust cap and you line up the little red, there's a little red dot. And so that just plugs in. And the other end here, I'll plug into the, I've got a couple of SMPTE Fiber converters in the rack here. So I'll plug that in. And you can see I can unplug the protection, and plug that cable in. There it is there. And it plugs in. Really solid connector. So it's one single cable for all the video, power, talkback, tally control. It's very clean, as you can see here. The connector on the studio converter is tilted down to help stop dust getting into the connector. Now, the one thing that's worth mentioning, we had someone ask about it, why is the connection on the front of the studio fiber converter? Well, the SMPTE, this connector here is essentially your optical patch bay. It's a very robust connector. It'll last for years, but also if there was damage, then we can easily change it. So we have this as a spare part, and the internal connections, the tails that come off the back of that connector, just plug into the circuit board. So our thinking was, when we looked at some of these big trucks and how they were installed, is they often had to have a separate optical patch bay that goes to the back of the unit, and it added, these are expensive connectors, and so it added a lot of extra costs. So what we felt is that the front of the product is actually the back of the product. This will probably be installed in the back of the rack, and so that SMPTE Fiber connector actually essentially becomes the bulkhead connector. That's the optical patch bay where you can plug your SMPTE connection straight into, and you've got a nice big screen right there. So when you plug in, you can see the picture up here, and you can see your cameras up. So really, it's a very robust connector. It's really easy to change. There's no sort of complicated fiber terminating. So we think it's really a much better idea to put the connection by itself on the other side of the unit. The connection's on the back here, but that means that if it's mounted in the back of the rack, you essentially got a whole row of fiber connectors you can just plug in and see it all come up. Now, what's also interesting is, and it's worth mentioning, this is an IP video connection. This is actually a 10G Ethernet connection down the fiber. So this is, it's a future-proof IP video-based design. We'll be able to open that up later. At the moment, it's pretty much proprietary end-to-end, but we'll be able to open up that later to allow you to plug into an IP, into a Ethernet switch and route IP around. So it's got, that was another thing that people really wanted to see. They wanted to see us open up the connection, the SMPTE Fiber connection between the camera unit and the studio unit. Generally, they're always proprietary. So even though at the moment it's a bit proprietary because we haven't opened that up, but we'll be able to do that in the future as a software update. It's worth taking a moment to talk about safety. This is 2 kilometres of cable here. Safety is very important. The converters, what they do is the converters. This is obviously this unit down the bottom, the studio unit, is a power supply as well as an IP, video converter. It's got video connections but the power supply, the big part of what this does is it's a power supply. It's got to be able to power 2 kilometres of cable to this end. And it's got to be able to provide enough power at this end to be able to power the cameras and do all this. So what happens is when you first plug that SMPTE fiber in, what happens is the converters do a safety check either end, and I'll do this. Thanks, guys. You've left my power switch off. It is actually plug and play, but I'll have to turn the power on so the whole thing powers up. So what's actually happening is, you can see, you can hear it. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's just powered on. What's actually happening is when you plug the power, the SMPTE fiber in, or you plug the converter in and turn the power on, which we just did, what actually happens is it's actually doing a safety check. They're talking to each other and they're working out if they power it up initially at low power and then do a whole bunch of checks. And when they think it's safe, then the fiber converter will come up and the voltage is switched off, but only after it's safe. So what's really happening is the studio converter here and the power supply is really identifying that this is our end plugged in, because obviously it's a SMPTE fiber. It's an open standard. You could have something else plugged. It could be plugged into the wrong camera. So it's got to identify this unit. And when it's happy, it checks the voltage and it checks for safety and it powers this unit up. It powers the cable properly so this unit can power up and the camera can power up. So I'll show you the other side here also. It's worth noticing is this SDI connections on the side is how it connects to the camera. So it bolts on the back. There's actually this connector rotates. It bolts onto the back of the camera. There's a plate that you attach to the camera, then it bolts on and it powers the camera through there. And those SDI connections is where it talks to the camera. There's SDI out, of course, and there's also returns. And the reference is also provided by this fiber converter to the camera. So the power is provided by the SMPTE fiber, so you don't need a battery. So that's, you take the battery plate off and use this. And it's also, as I showed, in fact, you can see the fiber has come up. There's the green lights have come up showing that the fiber and the power is all okay. So there's a lot of controls in the back because when you're using it as a studio camera, you operate a studio camera from the rear of the camera. So you can see there's a lot of extra controls and connections there that it provides. So as you can see there, because I've plugged it on, it's powered up and it's powered by itself. I'm just showing the unit by itself here. It's powered from the fiber and self-contained. You can see the status LEDs there. So it actually means it actually does work without a camera. And in fact, we use it on one of our monitor trolleys here, so we can do a return feed to it and plug into the SMPTE fiber, and we've got it just using it on a monitoring trolley. So it connects to the as I was saying, it connects to the camera using small SDI cables on the side, and it plugs into the back of the connections on the side here. So when it's bolted on the back of the camera here, these little cables, which is those cables are included with it, they plug into the side. So it's a very open standard. It would work with any camera really that would support a battery plate. Now on this side here, this power connection, it's normally where the battery plate connects onto on the back of the camera here, you can see. Now this will provide 12 volts at 6.2 amps to the camera. And that's enough power to power the Ursa broadcast itself, any viewfinder you might have on it, and the lenses, and extra items you might have connected onto there. So get back to the sort of safety issue, which we'll talk about first. I think safety is a big thing to talk about. So what I'll do is I'll get rid of this stuff and I'll actually unplug the SMPTE connection and I'll make some space. I'll plug this camera. In fact, what I'll do is we actually did try this. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but hey, I'll put this here. So what we want to do is really show you how the safety features work. So what we have here is a SMPTE fiber that we actually intentionally damaged. So even though the SMPTE fiber cable was incredibly tough, obviously like anything, there's always a chance for failure. So what I'll do is, this is still plugged into the other end. I'll plug, these cables can be looped. So what I'll do is I'll plug this cable together there, and I'll drop it down onto the floor. That's plugged into the converter over the other side here. And I'll have to be real careful here because as you can see there, in fact, I'll show you before I plug it in on that side. Where is it? There it is there. Ah, there it is. It's a bit hard to see, but what we've done is we've stripped back the, hang on a second. What I'll do is I'll unplug it from here because I don't really feel like touching it, even though I know that's not connected, so it hasn't switched up. I'll unplug that end. Let me pull that away. Oops, that was just a sharp bit of metal. So there you can see what we've done is we've got the power connection in the cable. We've stripped the cable back and you can see we've cut back the insulation on the power connection there. So we've created a fault in the cable. So what I'll do is I'll plug this in. So this is now looped through this cable. I'll plug this into the SMPTE fibre converter. It really is amazing, SMPTE fibre. It's really cool. And I'll plug this into the camera here so we can turn the tally light on. You can actually see the camera's operating. There it is there. So that should, if I'm very careful, that should power on. So it's obviously now connected and it's starting to talk to the camera and it's going to bring it online. So I think if you can imagine if the cable was damaged and it rained and water leaked into the cable. So for example, let's say if you're in a stadium and you had, pools of rainwater and with a damaged cable, that could be dangerous. I mean, there's, a lot of voltage going down the cable. We're not using any more or any less voltage than anyone else doesn't do with SMPTE fibre. But, the reality is if there's some kind of defect, the studio fibre converter has to detect the problem. And if it does, it'll shut down instantly. So what we'll do is we'll try that out and see how it works. So I've got my damaged cable. It's actually plugged in. What I'll do is I'll put the camera on air. There it is there. So we've got actually that's actually a 2MA switcher. If I can get a wide shot of the rack over here where I'm plugged into, is it possible to get a nice wide shot? So I've actually got a 2MA switcher in the rack that I've been running this panel off. There it is. So this is actually a 2MA Broadcast Studio 4K that's been upgraded to be a 4MA Broadcast Studio, and I've been running this switcher the whole time. So it's this is what in fact, I've been showing the 4MA switcher running an upgraded 2MA switcher, so you got that. But I've got my two SMPTE fibre units plugged in here. You can see the tallies coming back. They're pointed over at some charts over there. So what I've got now is I've got this cable coming out, going into this damaged cable, going into this camera. So as you can see, if I switch between the sources, you can see the tally light going on and off on the rack. And if we come back to the camera, I've got the tally on. So the reason for the tally being on is I can now see that the camera's powered and operating. So that converter over there is actually now powering that camera through this damaged fibre optic. You can see the power cable's been exposed. Now this is an exaggerated example of what would happen if a cable was damaged. I mean, we really had to work to damage that cable. It wasn't actually very easy. It's shielded by a nice earth shield. So it's a pretty strong cable. And even then, the internal power conductors are actually, shielded. I mean, inside this, if we pause for a moment, inside this cable, we've got a power pair, a data pair, and the fibre pair. And so when we damaged the cable and sort of ripped into it, there's an earth on the outside. This is actually all running, so I will not touch it. So we had to get into the power wire and then cut the power wire back. So even if a cable was damaged, the reality is the shield's going to get damaged first. Then you've got to get into the cable and damage the power cable. I don't think the camera would probably power on in that condition, but we've done it in a very careful way here. So it's a really, it's an exaggerated example of what would happen if the cable was damaged. These are industrial strength cables. It's unlikely to happen. But, we've got to plan for the worst case scenario. So what I'll do now is I'm going to get some water to simulate rain. I've got some down here. I've got a whole bunch of stuff down here. I'll reach down. I want to spill this. So here we go. Oh, God, I'm a bit nervous to do this because we actually did try this, but, I'd like everything. So now imagine if I have some water and, I've got some water in this tray. You can see the camera's powered on, it's operating, the tally light's on. So if I lower this cable into the water, this is like an extreme example of what happened if you had a cable out in a stadium, the cable was damaged and it started raining. The converter's doing constant safety checks to check that everything's okay. This is just like a live event if you've got damaged cables and rain. So let's do it and we'll see if it works. I've got to be careful I don't short it out. There it is. Camera just went off. And now if I put my hand in there, you can see that there's no safety problem and there's really no issues. Water everywhere. The camera's powered down and I touched the water and there was I didn't get shocked or die or anything. So everyone's safe, and that's really important. That these products can be used in all kinds of weather conditions. They could get damaged. They're pulled through different places. So, you know, it can happen. So what I'll do is let me clean up here. I'll move my water tub out of the way, and I'll show you some of the features. And I'll wipe up some of my water here. If you want to reset if it ever detects a power problem, all you need to do is unplug the cable and plug it back in again, and it'll reset. But in this case, I'm not going to plug this back in again. So what I'll do is I'll unplug this empty fiber cable and get it out of the way. And I'll plug myself back in again. So we don't want that. Sorry, went out of the shot there a bit. And what I'll do is now I've disconnected it. When I plug it back in again, it'll reset the safety circuitry, and it'll test the connection again to make sure that it can come up properly. And the camera will repower. So there it is. So what I'll do is I'll bring back my converters, and we can look at some of the controls. Now when you add this to the back of the camera, it adds a bunch of controls to, essentially to turn the camera into a studio camera. Now, there's a bunch of really cool things that it has. For a start, it supports down here the normal 5-pin headset connections. We've been using aviation headsets for a lot of talkback. They're very robust, but the television industry use a normal 5-pin type headset. In fact, I've got one here. This is the kind of headsets that they use. So that's very normal. You can use the headsets you already have. But also there's quite a lot of control with the talkback with the camera. There's when this is plugged into the camera, there's one main Ultra HD 12G input for the main camera feed back to the studio. I'll bring the studio converter back out again so we can try to make some space here. In fact, I'll put it on top. You get one Ultra HD and the camera's powered back up again and the tally lights reappeared. You get one 12G SDI feed from the camera back to the studio end, but you get 3 HD return feeds from the studio converter back to the camera converter. What's more important is having more, multiple return feeds. Now you can select which of the 3 channels come back. Each channel actually has its own SDI output connector. So of each of those 3 video channels that come back, you can see that if I take these off, you've got 3 return feeds appearing on there. So you can use those return feeds for program video or one for a prompter, for example. I mean, they're fully independent, so you can pretty much do whatever you like. But also on the back of the camera, you'll notice, on the back of the converter, you'll notice you've got 2 returns. So you can set these up. It's a little bit complex to explain this, but this is very normal. This is how it works. What you've essentially got is 3 video channels back, or return feeds, but you've got these 2 returns. Now you can select on this switch here which of the 3 returns which of the 3 channels coming back you want on that return and this return either. So there's 2 of those. So you can basically then select those just by pushing a button. So if I push the buttons on the back here, I get a return feed appearing on my viewfinder and also on the internal LCD if you're using that. And you can select which of those 3 return channels go into those 2 returns. So you can see that's pretty easy. Now, you can also select the 1 and 2 return buttons on the side. So on the side here, you'll notice they're there. If you've got this camera on your shoulder, you really want to be using those return feeds there. They're easy to press. So they're on the side. That's important because often these cameras are shoulder mounted. You can use them in a studio configuration like that, but you can also put them on the shoulder mount configuration. And you see people wandering around sporting grounds, around the edge of sporting grounds doing interviews in that configuration all the time. They've got the one empty fiber cable dragging around. You've got all the talk back and program returns and everything through that one fiber. So that's really nice to have that. There's also a call button on the side as well, which flashes the tally to get attention. So if you've got a problem, you need to get attention and you can't use the talk back or anything, because often, if you're on a studio floor, in fact, the camera guys working here can't talk because I'm talking and you'd hear it. So being able to have a call button's nice. And the reason I'm going through some of these features is if you haven't used a SMPTE fiber or studio camera before, I thought I'd go in a bit more detail about some of these features so you get a bit of a feel for what you actually get if you use this kind of product. Now, what's interesting, if you look down below here, there's a mixed return program. There's a return program mix. You've got the two talkback channels, but you can actually mix in the two the two returns, the program audio from those two returns into the headset. So what that means is you can mix the audios from channels 1 and 2 on the returns, or there's also a headset talkback volume control. So you can you've got a small mixer here really between the two returns and your talkback audio, and you can kind of get the balance right. But then there's two separate sets of those, one for each talkback headset you can plug in. So you can have like a director hanging off the side of the camera, just worried about that, but at the same time have the camera operator also having a talkback. So you've got two independent talkbacks on there, which is really nice. So these controls let you really adjust the mix of the talkback and the program audio as you like. Now, all our products actually use channels 15 and 16 of the SDI audio for talkback. And so normally that's how it operates. So what this means is this converter supports all the other products we have, but at the same time, there's also an extra talkback it's got on channels 13 and 14, and that's the engineering talkback, and there's a switch there that lets you select that. So what that means is if you're doing your regular talkback with a director, but you might actually need, on a large job, you might have a separate engineering person who's running around sort of solving problems or whatever it might be, you can switch over to that engineering talkback and you've got a whole second set of talkback. Now, there's also a mic on-off switch, so you can just turn the microphone on and off. Most of the time, camera operators don't have the mic on, but you turn it on occasionally when you need to talk. Now, what's also interesting is, before I mentioned that the SMPTE fiber actually has a data channel. There's the power pair and then there's the actual fiber pair, but there's a data channel on the cable. Now, what we've got is an emergency talkback using that data channel. Now, that data channel is used when the when the converters are first plugged in to check, who's at each end of the cable so they can power up. But what happens if the fiber doesn't come up? The converters will try and talk down that analog data channel, that sort of analog pair, so that you can still have some kind of talkback. So it kind of falls over to that, so that you can still get some communication. So you can kind of call up and say, hey, hang on a second, the fiber light hasn't come online. There's something's wrong. I'm not getting video channels and everything up. So you can still ask for help. And that's really important if you're on the other side of a stadium and it's quite a walk to get back. You can't just leave your camera. You've got to get someone to help you. So that's also there. It's like an emergency talkback. Now, it really is dependent on the cable. It's using that manual, that analog pair. So, we get a kilometre, but it really varies a lot depending on cable. You won't get the 2 kilometres, but it's hard to tell what distance you get. It varies from cable to cable. Now, on the studio unit, there's a talkback. I'll show you the back of the studio unit because, again, we're working to be, really to integrate into normal kind of, higher end systems. There's a talkback connector on there, which has got all the talkback channels all broken out at analog connections. There's full details of that in the instruction manual on what the connections are. They're all described in there. But what that means, you can use third-party talkback systems, which all the high-end, those $20 million trucks all use. But also the talkback does come out on the SDI channels 15 and 16. So like I was saying, you can use the Blackmagic Studio Converter and some of the other things we have for normal talkback, and it all works very normal. The tally is via SDI, like our other switches have, but again, it's also on the connector. So you can use any tally system you like. And of course, the camera control is fed up from the switcher. So, it actually embeds it into here, into the IP data stream, comes up in here, comes back out on the SDI connections, back out to the camera. And so the camera control is exactly the same way as it is with the other studio cameras we have. But it's sort of, going via the optical fiber path. So what this means is all our ATEM switches can use, you can sort of interact with all the switches we have. And also our studio cameras and micro studio cameras and Ursa Minis all kind of work together with a similar sort of standards. One thing that was worth mentioning is the fiber converter also has some status indicators. I might show you down here. I'll swing the camera around if you guys can get a shot of that. You can actually see them operating. If I turn this around, get a nice view of that there. So the power is green because the full power is applied from the studio unit and it's running the camera. The fiber is green because the full link is operating in 2 directions. And the tally is actually lit red because it's it's on air. I've got this selected as the on-air camera. So what's actually happening is the camera is outputting a tally override bit to tell the downstream devices like the converter that it's on air. So that's how the light indicate comes on. So that's how I can illuminate the tally indicator. So I'll put those back and give myself some space here and hopefully don't trip over the cables. So what this means is, this essentially makes Ursa Broadcast a great studio camera. But it's a bit different because it records internally. The extra controls that you have on the fiber unit allow you to operate it from the rear. And also there's a couple of extra controls that it's worth mentioning. You got down the side here. Because it records internally, it's not quite the same as a normal studio camera. So we have to have a few extra sort of buttons and controls. Obviously, we have autofocus and iris adjustments on the back there, but there's a record button. So that lets you trigger recording in the camera from the rear of the camera because, you're operating from it. You're generally standing here. You don't want to have to sort of reach around the side. You can push record right from the back there. Now, there's also a backlight switch, so you can illuminate all the labels. They're all backlit. And the other thing, too, that it's got, and you've probably noticed it right down the very bottom, and I'll take the caps off, but there is a couple of extra audio inputs. And these are embedded into the SDI stream as channels 3 and 4. So the camera channels are 1 and 2, which the camera already has, and it's outputting those embedded channels via the SDI. But this unit, it gives you an extra 2 channels of audio. So you've actually got 4 channels of audio in total, channels 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, there's also a DC connector on the back, which is, I'm uncovering everything here. You can see the DC connector on the back there. That'll give you 12 volts at 500 milliamps. There's also an Ethernet connector on the side here, which will give you an Ethernet connection back to the other end. There's Ethernet on the other end. Now, that's actually not supported yet. We're going to do a software update to support that, but we'll get that done soon, hopefully. And we've got a DTAP connection on the other side here as well, and that gives you 12 volts and 2 amps. So not only do you get the 6 amps out to the camera on the connection here, but you've also got another 2 amps on the side. And that's really good for the these big box lenses because you can power the lens and the camera and the viewfinder and everything from the converter. So that's really useful having those extra power outputs. Now there's also in fact, I think it might be back around this other side, there's a PTZ connector on there as well. And that's linked to the same connector on the back of the converter here. So you can also control a gimbal mount. And there's a tracker interface on the back as well. So there's quite a lot of features, very hardcore, heavy broadcast features that this product has. Now, this is all supported in Camera Update 5.0. Camera Update 5.0 has the support for Ursa Broadcast and the fiber converters. Now, we recommend that people download that for these cameras because it's the latest software. But these fiber converters will work on Ursa Mini and Ursa Mini Pro. So you can add them. I think the only feature that doesn't work is I mentioned that the camera's outputting a tally override bit for the tally indicator on the back. I don't think that actually works on Ursa Mini and Ursa Mini Pro yet, but we'll do a software update for that and we'll have support for that soon. So you can see it's a really, we're quite excited about this fiber optic link. We think it's really in many ways, I think the philosophy is we just said yes to everything. We pretty much everything everybody wanted, we said yes to. It's a very powerful solution. And when used with Ursa Broadcast and the Studio Viewfinder, you get an incredible package. It's amazing. It extends and powers the camera up to 2 kilometers away. I mean, we could have this camera down at the beach and from here we'd be able to power and operate it. I mean, it's amazing really that it can go that distance. It's great for Ultra HD or even HD. It's got all the same professional controls that broadcasters are expecting. This is, what they use all the time. I mean, not only are we adding the optical fiber to a camera that records, but we're also adding all the controls that a studio camera has. It's a really strong magnesium design, very high levels of safety, as you saw. But you can install it as you grow. Like if you might connect most of your cameras with SDI, then you add this one to just the furthest camera. You can remove and add it back at will. It depends if you want to reconfigure everything to cameras that shoot and put battery plates on or change back. It allows you to repurpose cameras as studio cameras for really big jobs. It can be used even without a camera or even on other cameras. So, because it did operate, as you saw, by itself. The thing that's really nice, it improved the talkback experience with Ursa Mini. Ursa Mini had a little headset support, so you could actually do talkback, but this is a really television industry standard talkback, and you get more audio channels. It's a modern IP-based video design, and we'll be able to open up that IP layer in the future. So at the moment, it's sort of, they only connect together, but that'll give you a possibility of plugging into switches and things later. And it works with Ursa Mini and Ursa Mini Pro. And we'll add some support for some of the small features that might be missing there, but it even works with the cameras we've already been selling. So, so if we can show the slide for the price. So each end, we're starting to manufacture them today, so they'll be available over the next week or so. They're $2,995 at each end, which is dramatically cheaper than what anything like this has ever been available for before. Now, the reason we're selling them separately is we think people will probably want to buy extra studio units so they get some redundancy. You can have, if we go back to the rack for a moment, you can, quick guys, get the camera shot. So sorry, middle of chaos here, but as you can tell, if you have more units in the rack and you can just have one that's powered off and not used, if something fails, you can just pretty much just patch in and power up and then off you go again. So the unit itself is essentially the redundancy. So we think people might want to buy extra studio units for redundancy. So we make them a separate purchase. You can buy either end in whatever volume you like. But later on, if we're doing IP-based stuff, you might find that people just want to buy the camera end and then connect it into a switch and locally power the camera. So you can buy them in any sort of way you want. And of course, again, you don't actually have to have optical fiber. You can still connect the cameras via SDI. You get all the control, tally, talkback, all that stuff with our switches. But if you want to get that length and that wonderfully clean, simple optical fiber connection with everything through it and the power, then you can add this as you go. You can really just buy whatever components you need as you do more work. We think adding SMPTE fiber to the most distant cameras first is probably the most convenient way of doing it, and that'll probably be the way most people go with it. So it's much more convenient to run that single fiber than kind of 5 or more cables you need for a more complicated setup. So what does this mean for Ursa Broadcast and sort of the options we have for studio cameras? I think it's worth kind of looking at that. So I think if we come back across here, I think we start out with a great entry level. We have a great entry level camera with a Blackmagic Studio Camera 4K. In fact, we've got one over there. Sorry to sort of spring this on you. If you can cut to a wider shot, perhaps we might be able to show this one over here. There it is. So the Blackmagic Studio Camera. I'm going to get a close up of that. It's an all-in-one studio camera with 12G SDI. It's obviously got a built-in monitor, but it uses micro Four Thirds lenses. It's that original studio camera kind of revolutionized small studio and live events production. It's been that was a fun product to work on, and it's a great entry-level product. So we've always been, it's one of those products that we kind of really love. It's such a unique design. It's a great entry level. Another alternative is the Micro Studio Camera 4K, which is the one here. It's very small, so you can hide it on set. So these have been the studio cameras that we've had, but now with Ursa Broadcast, the studio camera range we have can get much higher end. When you think about how Ursa Broadcast can grow with you, it's pretty powerful. So I think it's worth showing the way Ursa Broadcast can sort of be transformed, just to sort of summarize that in a way, so you can kind of see how it can be configured in different ways. So if I come back to the cameras here, in fact, what I'll do is I'll get rid of the base studio camera and I'll bring out, so here's an example of Ursa Broadcast that's had the lens mount removed. It's got the shoulder kit. It's had the lens mount changed to a photography lens. So I think that, this is a really wonderful entry-level camera, or it's great when it's locked off and, you can use this locked off, mounted. In fact, even without the shoulder mount kit, you can have that locked off on set somewhere, kind of like how the small camera works, but it's obviously, much bigger. You can add a viewfinder or a B4 lens at any time, or a shoulder kit if you're doing programming work, and that kind of gets you into this realm. So you could the studio viewfinder, so you can sort of upgrade as you go, and you can kind of then get this, this sort of whole production camera for shooting. But then if you want to extend and go to more live production work, you can then sort of transform it in a different way by adding a studio viewfinder, as we have here. And so, you can sort of see how it starts to move depending on sort of how you can configure it. Then if you want to extend the camera a long way away, you can then add the SMPTE fiber converter and transform it into a really high-end professional studio camera. So you can see really just this one camera can do these different range of things, but then you can even go further. You can go all the way up to the very top of studio broadcast style cameras. So if we come across here, we haven't showed this yet, and we've got a shot of that, but we've got a big box lens on on the camera. If I'll move it into the shot a bit, we've got it on one of the proper pedestals, and you can see you've got all the controls and massive lens, all the studio controls. It's probably up a bit high for me. So it really is amazing what this camera can do. It's, we've really, developed this sensor to capture as much detail as possible. The body's got enough flexibility to do all this. I mean, we've got, great amounts of light coming in, but wonderful depth of field. You can configure the camera for news, sport, music, events. The viewer can see much more detail and action in the image than, with this camera. It's perfect for a beginner. And then it upgrades shooting for live work all the way up. It's got 3D LUTs, so you can bounce the camera, or you can use the camera control from the switcher. We've got new levels of affordability for high-end broadcasters. But the whole broadcast chain normally costs sort of 10 or 20 times as much, thousands of dollars. So I think that what this means is we can sort of reach out to smaller broadcasters, also web broadcasters. This is there's now sort of a cost benefit for traditional broadcasters to allow them upgrade to Ultra HD. This is an Ultra HD chain. But newer web, emerging web broadcasters can use the same professional tools. There's just no limits to, based on, there's no class difference, I guess would probably be the best way to explain that. And if you're a freelancer, you can now work for web broadcasters with the same tools, or you can upgrade your tools and, use the lenses and everything you already have and the batteries you have. I mean, it's, there's just such a much wider range of companies that you can work for now if you're a freelancer. The web broadcast guys, really, they haven't, they've been able to now, they know they can get the talent of kind of the high-end freelance guys. Because, if they've got the tools, then you can get the high-end guys will work there as well. So I think for freelancers, it's a much bigger industry. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. We think that Versa Broadcast is really, in many ways, it's a modular camera that allows you to kind of configure it as you need. And so gone are the days of the unlimited budgets. You don't want to buy 3 different kinds of cameras for this kind of work. So I think that, this camera can become, it's 3 or 4 different cameras in one based on how you can configure it. But obviously going all the way up to this big camera means you can really, you can just do the highest end work. So it's amazing to think that you could buy the camera, at just with a photo lens, but this is the same, you can move all the way up through these configurations all the way up to this. And this is the same camera here that's on the table here as the small camera. So, they're the same Versa Broadcast camera, just configured in different ways. So where does that leave us? So we do have one more thing that I think it's important to talk about, but we'll head back down to the rack down here so you can see the some of the configuration. So I've got a 4ME broadcast studio in the rack here. In fact, as I said before, it's actually an upgraded 2ME broadcast studio 4K. And I've also got a couple of Blackmagic fiber studio converters in the rack behind me here as well. And normally those fiber converters would be installed in the back of the rack, but I wanted to put them in the front of the rack here so you can see them and I can plug in. Now these are connected up to the 4ME broadcast studio here, and I've been running the advanced panel down here to control the switcher through the whole press conference here. So what I really wanted to do is, while I've got this all connected up, is talk about camera control and sort of how we've been doing it now. So if we could just switch across to the software UI, you can see the software UI. And if I click on the camera tab, this is currently how our switches talk to the cameras. What happens is the control happens through here. It goes, essentially the switcher is actually the master. It's talking to the cameras. And this is the software interface that tells the switcher what the cameras should do. Lens control, the color correctors that are built into the cameras, and things like that. Now it works, but it's harder to do than a camera color and control via software. It works and it's free, obviously, because it's included with the software, but it is a bit tricky to do. So what's missing is some really good camera control, and we need to fix that. Normally, we wouldn't want to really talk about this yet because it's not ready to ship, but there is a gap in the workflow that's pretty obvious, so I think we need to explain it. And so what I want to show you is it won't be shipping until May or June, but I think it's pretty important to show. So I think the first step is if you're not used to, or you don't really understand, haven't had experience with a traditional CCU controller from the high-end live broadcast industry, this is really how it's done. Like if I get I've got a controller here, These are the units that are used to control cameras for live performance. You know, you've got a bunch of controls. Now, the problem with this, apart from being expensive, is that you've actually got to cut a hole in the bench with one of these. You've got to use a saw to chop a hole in the bench to install that. So I don't know whether that's really, it's a bit intrusive. So I don't know if you did a wedding video and you went along to do a high-end wedding video. You know, live wedding videos are awesome. I've seen some of the work our customers have been doing. I don't think it'd get too happy if you started cutting all this stuff up. Plus also, let me get rid of this. Wow, it's heavy. A lot of stuff under here. The other thing too is it pokes through the desk, so you're always banging your legs onto them. But they are really nice to use. You get all the controls. So we think that the challenge for us was to, I'll get rid of this, was to design something that works in that traditional way. It's got all those controls that everybody expects, but it's got to be desktop mounted. And also the design needs to look nice and modern. So what I want to show you is what we've developed. Been working pretty hard on it. In fact, I'll make some space to bring it out. I'll get rid of the computer here, actually. I'll fold that up. Just bear with me. I'll put this over here. And I'll move this across so we can get make some space for ourselves. And I'll bring out what we've been working on. So this is the ATEM advanced camera control. There it is there. I'll put it in the right spot so you can get a shot of that. There it is. And so you can see it matches the design of the new 1ME advanced panel, but it's got all the traditional controls. So it's instantly usable. There's no retraining required for anyone that's high end. But what's nice is it sits on the desk. So it's very portable, and you get 4 whole camera controllers in the one panel. So it's very affordable. So it just plugs in using Ethernet, just like the other one. I've got it looped through the panel here. This is the connection that was actually plugged into the computer. I've got a AC power supply. Well, sorry, an AC connection. So it'll power on there. So it just powers up and works. It's plugged into the switcher. There it goes. So this is, it's basically, they're 4 independent channels. Now, what you can do is you can control, there's 4 controllers on here, but you can actually control more cameras because you can adjust the camera number down here. Where is it? Sorry, that one. There it is. Sorry, that was on air, so of course I couldn't control the camera number. It's another one of those safety things to stop you screwing up when you're on air. So you can just change the knob and you can adjust the camera number. You can see that the camera number is actually displayed on the LCD, but it's also displayed down here. So it's very, very clear to see which cameras you're controlling, which is really important because you don't want to be hitting the wrong camera, so it's very important. And the cameras turn red when they're on air, so you can see the colours change. And I've actually also I was using camera 3 into the Kia before, so I've still got that working. It's very easy to use. If you see this big knob here, if you haven't used one of these before, I can go through just a few quick explanations. I want to go into too detail because obviously the videos, the stream will get too long, but this big knob is adjusting the iris. So as I adjust that, it'll adjust the iris on the camera. And I'm adjusting camera 2 here, and you can see the big lenses. I don't know if you can get a shot of that actually. As I adjust camera 2, you can see there's an indicator. I don't know if you want to go in a bit closer on that, but you can see there's an indicator on the side of the lens, on the box lens that's going up and down. So I'm controlling the iris using that large knob. And so you can see the iris setting also down here on the display. If I can get another close-up of the panel, I'm not sure if I can get a shot of that. You can see, can you get the top shot from above? Might be a bit better to see actually. It's a bit of a angled shot. Not sure if you get, thought we had a camera that was higher up. So that iris display is there. Now the big knob gives you a really nice smooth control, and the broadcast lenses actually support that smooth control. The photo lenses are, the iris is more jumpy, but the broadcast lenses support that. The big knob also rotates. There's a rotation I'll move that down forward there so you can see that. But underneath there, there's a rotation, and that's the master black control. And you can see the when I rotate that, it adjusts the master black. And you can also see that on the, I should move my hand out of the way so I think you can see that. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the master black settings down there. So this is all the same as any traditional CCU. It's a very normal way for things to work. There's also a coarse knob, sets the limits of the iris control for the big knob. There's also a sense knob that sets the sensitivity of the iris control on that large knob. There's also an iris MB active button, which is down there. What that lets you do is basically disable that big knob. So if you're doing some fine adjustments, you don't bump the knob, you can kind of disable it with a button push. You can still use the other controls, it's just that big knob is disabled. Now the auto iris does the auto iris on the camera. It's the same kind of control that's on the camera. There's also a call button down there so you can flash the tally to get attention. Now one thing that's really worth showing, and I think we have it set up here. Yes, we do. Pushing the knob changes the monitoring. Now, one of the things that we've been doing on our switches for a long time is using one of the aux outputs for camera monitoring. When you're using the software CCU, as you touch the different camera channels, it'll change that aux output to look at that camera, and that you can use that output for camera monitoring. And this feature worked only in software before by selecting, as you select it in the UI, but now it's doing it from pushing the knob. So when you push the knob, it'll now change to this camera or this camera as you're adjusting. So really, you can do that from the CCU panel. So you can see the cameras that you're adjusting automatically on the monitor, and it's really important when you're doing color adjustments and trying to match cameras. You want to be able to move between the cameras really quickly. So just push the knobs. Now, if I can just, before I move on, if I can just show you actually this working. If we can get a close up of the rack, you can see as I push. So I'm pushing camera 2, and you see that's aux 1 that I've got selected to do this camera monitoring. And as I go to camera 3, camera 4, you can see that that aux is changing. So that's how that works. So it gives you the ability, if you're operating off the panel like I'm doing here and not using a computer, you can set the monitoring just by pushing the knob. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning, we've used up until now, we've actually, I don't know, some people don't know this, but the DaVinci micro panel, which I have here, actually works with the Atem software. So you can do color correction adjustments. Obviously, it's a DaVinci primary color corrector in all our cameras. So it's pretty creative, and you can use this DaVinci micro panel to do color correction. It's a great solution for doing color control of the cameras. It's low cost, and it's very creative because, it works like a color correction. It's proper primary color correction. So, but it's a colorist's view of camera control. It's very creative, but it's not really the standard way of doing it. CCU color adjustments are quite different. Colorists are very creative with color, and it's amazing to have a DaVinci color corrector in the cameras and being able to do all that wonderful sort of creative looks, and a lot of people really love that. But CCU operators just want to trim out color imbalances most of the time. So I'll put this away here, and I can show you how that works. So a good example is, say the sun sets on an outside job, and the color temperature is changing. So you need to be able to compensate for that. And this is where color correction is really important. Now, I'm a really bad colorist, even though I worked on telecines for years, in the old days and things like that. I easily get lost. The problem with the trackball is that when you're doing color correction work with it, you really got to know what you're doing. Otherwise, you kind of just get lost off somewhere. I find myself, I'm always resetting. But the camera control uses RGB knobs, and it's much easier in many ways to get a color, to do color correction with that, because each color's got independent control. So, for example, with a trackball, everything's adjusted at once because you're literally moving in that color space. But with knobs, you can just get to one color at a time. So it's kind of a lot easier. It's traditional for people who are used to working that way. For me, I find that easier because I don't want to get lost. I just want to kind of trim out some color imbalance. So one of the tricks that, as we talk to people about this design, is one of the CCU operator tricks is they actually don't often touch green. They just adjust the red and blue channel. And what I really love about that is it's easy to really tell, if the images are too warm or if they're too cold. So it's quite easy to adjust in some red or blue depending on the sort of warmth or coolness of the image. But if you leave the green untouched, it kind of gives you a reference in color. So I know colorists will probably be laughing, going, hey, what's the problem? But for me, I personally like this method because I feel like it's more under control. I'm not as creative with color correction as the colorists are. One of the things that I used to see in the old TV industry is almost a disrespect for the art of color correction. And I don't, pretend to have those skills myself. But with the RGB knobs, I find I can balance color and match cameras much easier. So it is a really nice feature. In fact, if we let's cut to one of the cameras and quickly show you what that means. We're going to be on, we'll better point the camera at something. Oh yeah, we've turned our brightness down. So there we go, we're back up. So if we could, I don't know if we can get a shot of the switcher. Well, we can do it, yeah, we can do it with the CCU there. So you can see I'm adjusting the big knob and you can see the brightness going up and down. And but what I can also do is I can adjust the color on the knobs here. I've got the red, green, blue in black, and I've got red, green, blue in highlights and shadows of separate controls. So if I adjust that, you can see it's changing warming up the image. I'm adjusting the red here. If I adjust the blue, I'm getting control of that. I'm doing extreme adjustments here. But you can see it gives you quite a bit of control. I haven't touched the green there, so you can now do the color adjustments through the controls, and you can see the LCD go red on the color corrector. So I think that's a really nice way of keeping the color, the cameras all balanced. You really do get a lot of control here. Now the switcher is still the primary control of the cameras. So what that means is that if the software could still be changed, so the panel controls won't jump if the panel's connected. What it'll do is it'll sort of on the knobs here, it'll basically take the software setting and apply it to the knobs in a way that you can then adjust, and it won't kind of like jolt the cameras, because that's the last thing you need is a sudden change in camera color correction. What you really want is whatever you've got on the software being applied to this panel. All the other settings, of course, configure because they're all soft buttons, but the knobs themselves have to be, you don't really want suddenly the cameras all jumping when you plug the panel in. So it takes care of all that. Now, there's some extra settings on the panel. As before we finish up, we've got 5 store buttons, and you can push store in it, or to save and recall settings in the panel. The settings are saved in the flash of the RAM of the panel itself. There's some other settings in there, such as master gain setting. There's a shutter speed, of course. There's a button even to select color bars for camera setup. So there's a lot of other controls on there as well. It's too many to go through because we don't want to get too long here. But I think this completes the entire solution for camera control for live production. You can control 4 cameras at once, but you can also really quickly change to other cameras. So even though you've got 4 simultaneously, you can pretty much do all of the cameras from the one panel. But remember, you can also add extra panels like this. You can have another one to get 8 cameras simultaneously. Really depends on your budget. It's an elegant design that matches the design of the 1ME, the new ATEM 1ME advanced panel. But the controls on here are very, very familiar controls for high-end operators. So I think they'll find it really easy to use. They'll sit down and see that it's really very, very normal. It installs on a desk, so you don't need to cut a hole. It's got the same bolt down holes to secure it. So it adds security, but also means that you can bolt it down onto a rack shelf because it fits within a rack shelf. It's the same width as the 1ME panel. It's also got the AC and DC power inputs. So you can, again, use that for redundant power, or DC operate it from batteries. If I can show the pricing slide for this one. As you see there, it is the ATEM camera control panel. It'll be $2,995, and it'll be available, we expect, in May or June. So so we think that that's all we have today. We've got a pretty big range of products here that we've shown. So thanks for bearing with us. We hope these new products really kind of help you build your studios and your creative capability. That's the thing that really matters deeply to us, is how much creative capability that you get from these products. We really hope that it helps traditional broadcasters upgrade to Ultra HD. We also hope that web broadcasters can access truly professional tools that operate in a professional way. And so then we hope that that these high-end freelance guys that have got incredible talents can work with a much wider range of companies, and they can just get more work in general, or even buy some of their own gear and bring that along to their clients. So we think the products look really nice together. We haven't really said no to features in any way on these products. We've just said yes to everything. It's great to just have everything you could possibly ever want. We really hope in some ways that these products will help change broadcast for the better. I think the engineers who've worked on these have done a wonderful job. I personally want to thank the engineers and designers here at Blackmagic that have worked on these products. It's a privilege to work with these guys. It's an amazing, when you see all the products together, we're all surprised because all the groups are working on them independently, and then you see them all together like this. It's pretty amazing. So again, we'd like to also thank you guys for your support. It means a lot to us, and we couldn't do any of this without you. It's worth noting that it's worth following us on Twitter and Facebook so you can get updates. We don't like emailing people because it's kind of intrusive. I think, emails are kind of annoying. We do it occasionally. We'll probably do an email about these products. Keep at, we do a lot of updates that we give away for free, such as the 2ME switcher upgrade to 4ME. We just did a really big update to DaVinci Resolve, and we posted that on Twitter and Facebook. We didn't email. So if you keep track of those, you'll be able to see any of the updates for your products. And we often get surprised how many people are running older software versions when we've got a lot of new stuff that we've added to newer software versions, and we're doing that all the time. So we hope to see you soon and get some feedback on these new products at the next show. But otherwise, that's pretty much all we have. So take care, and thanks a lot for your time, and thanks for watching.